You're listening to Force Majeure, an actual play Star Wars podcast. My name is Adam and I'm your host, and today's episode is something a little bit different. This is a bonus episode, which is the morality chat. We're having to think about how best to do the morality chat for this part of the story, this crux that our heroes have found themselves on. And my concern, to be honest, was if we just did it at the start of the next episode, episode 28, it would interfere with the pacing that we built up so far, and it caused us to stumble a little bit. But at the same token, we felt that it was important to do. It was a good point in the story to do it. I knew I wanted to get one in before we got to the final denouement of the show. And the way that the holiday season and our recording schedules and availability hit meant that we were having a bit of a gap between episode 27, which you just listened to, and episode 28, which is coming. And it just seemed like the perfect time to get this in the bag and to have this discussion so it didn't interfere with the story any further. And so going into that final confrontation with 10th Brother, we knew where the crew were, whether any of them had fallen, where they all stood. Now, these were all recorded one-to-one, and the crew were sworn to secrecy, really. They have not heard this episode. So when this is released to you, that'll be the first time that they've heard it as well. By the time this is released, we will have recorded episode 28. But I wanted them to go into that episode without knowing if any of them had fallen, because I think that that is something that is a lot more spicy to find out in actual play and to come into the story organically rather than a rather jarring mechanical discussion. So this is new to them as well, and it might well be that it's not come up in the story at the point we're recording. I can't say because it's not happened yet, but they are finding out at the same point that you are. So I hope you find this interesting. There is obviously some spoilers here for the episodes that you've listened to already, but I presume that you won't have listened to them until you've got to here. I don't know, I suppose it's whether or not iTunes cues this up peculiarly. I don't know. There's also nothing story critical in here if you're not interested in this kind of discussion and you just want to skip it and go straight to the proper story next episode. You know, we're not going to judge you on that. Different strokes for different folks. Some folks quite like these chats, others don't. I get that. And that's another reason why I wanted to do it as a separate thing. So the option was there to jump ahead if you didn't fancy it. So without any further ado, let's get into the discussion.
Hi, I'm Mim. I play Lassa. She's a human sentinel artisan. Her strength is her curiosity, but her weakness is obsession.
Okay, so for this morality chat, Lassa, you are currently the highest scored of all of the crew due to your sheer determination, and this being the only times your dice actually roll high. We are starting this chat with a morality score for you of 52.
It's not bad.
So, I think we both know what we're going to be talking about here. And that is the cold, calculated, and deliberate murder of an unconscious and defenseless person. And not only did you murder him while he was unconscious, you sent Prinkle away before you did it, so you wouldn't have to look into the eyes of the moral compass of the party.
Yep. And I took and I stopped Duren from being merciful because I knew he wasn't going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I would have killed all his friends too if they hadn't given me a reason. Well, if they hadn't given me an excuse not to. So Duren worked very well there. Yeah, Lassa's been through a lot.
Yeah. There were other options on the table. He could have been exiled on Daxos, which is not a death sentence necessarily, because people can survive on Daxos. Pyjak did it. Others have done it, surviving as a hunter. You could have handed him in for the bounty and trusted to the bounty hunters to keep it quiet because it's in their best interest not to.
In for the bounty. We just handed in the body for the bounty.
Yeah. I'm not sure that's quite the point I'm trying to make here.
No,
really.
I understand that.
But I suppose the counterpoint is it's been very clear in the way you've been playing Lassa that this is something that's preying on her mind.
Yeah. In her defense, when she did it, she'd just come out of a very emotionally trying conversation whereby the one place where she thought anyone can go, no matter how down on their luck they are, and they'll always be not welcomed with open arms, because it's not that kind of place, but there'll be a bowl of gruel from Grandma, and they'll be able to get back on their feet with a little bit of help, because everybody's been in a tough situation. And suddenly she realized that there was a massive threat hanging over this place just by her and her crew being there. And this particular person was a danger to the stopover, a danger to the crew personally, because he's the kind of person who could have had a vendetta, and anything that could lead the Empire to us, to the stopover, was going to be a problem. And that guy was a big glowing beacon of pettiness who could have brought all hell to the stopover, and the only people that she still kind of cared about at the time, in that way that you not in a, oh, these are my friends, but the way that you always expect family to be there, but you don't necessarily spend all day thinking of home. To suddenly have that all been put at risk really threw her. And, we've been going through the world trying to muddle through and survive. And she really, at the time, couldn't see a cleaner way of getting rid of the problem before it could become a bigger one. It was the only thing that stuck in her head, to really cut the head off the snake right there. No loose ends.
How do you square dealing that risk from Bosco with the fact you're still associating with Oberon? Or Baron, I suppose, at this point?
Well, originally it was because they were just flung together and, rats on the run. We've got no one to rely on except ourselves. And she always felt separate from the rest of the crew because they were criminals with a capital C. It was documented and there was paperwork to prove it. And she wasn't. She wasn't even a smuggler with a little C for criminal. She was just, the way that builders might knock a tenner off here or slightly fudge their taxes. Everyone does it to just get by. So that doesn't count as proper crime, But with Oberon, I think you start to make excuses for the people who've got your back, and you can see them trying to do good. And he has certainly tried to be better, which has been brilliant to watch his character arc grow. It really has. And she also knows that a lot of what he did was forced on him by his family. And now he's away from that, completely away from that. He had shown great promise as being a moral individual, and that effort is really important to him. And I think that's something that she considers worthy. I suppose you could also say the same for Agatha, but Agatha has generally looked for fights with things that want to fight him back. So that's a little different as well. But yeah, now she does consider them a crew and part of her team and her space family. I think the only reason she's not thought about it with Oberon is because the recent stuff, she's seen why it's needed to be done. And the earlier stuff, she has seen him turn around and start to go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I think it's from my family. And she's like, okay, all right, that's progress. We can build on that.
Okay. And I suppose the last question, really, I don't know, it's more of a point of curiosity for me as the GM, really. And if you don't want to answer this, that's fine, obviously, because the rest of the crew won't hear this until the week before episode 28 comes out. Do you think there's going to become a point where Baron becomes the kind of threat to the stopover that Bosco was? And if that happens, how do you think you'll act?
She really doesn't, because he seems to be trying to become some, I'm not really sure if a holy person is the way, but he's trying to enter a sort of spirituality. And whereas she knows that Jedi have been bad in the past, and the dark Jedi, the Sith, I'm not sure she knows the name of the Sith, but she understands that there's the other side as well. There've been trouble for big planets, small settlements, all sorts of stuff. She can't really imagine him taking anything out on these people. It's just not his world, and it doesn't seem to be something that he would ever be concerned about. And if anything, it's probably somewhere that he might remember to go if he does try and live a better life and ends up needing to hide from small potato problems, you know. She actually thinks Agatha could find a good home on the stopover because his strength with the moral compass of people like Grandma could really be of benefit to the place. So no, I don't think they're going to be a risk. She did originally worry that he might be not unsavable, not beyond redemption, but that hunting coldness could be something dangerous if it was pointed in the wrong direction. And then she thought his need to suddenly drag morality into everything, like when we were fighting Mr. Flesh, could become stupidly dangerous because he will allow danger to grow while he's trying to work out whether he should kill the thing that's pointing a gun at his head and his friends, you know. But he seems to have rounded that off quite nicely. And currently I can't see, and Lasser can't imagine them turning it onto that kind of place. Everybody seems very set on who the bad guys are, and it's the Empire. So if anything, the big problem will be, because she started to stop identifying the Empire as people she worked with, like she did back at Daxos, people who are doing a job, and she has started to see them as stormtroopers, snowtroopers, faceless people who are trying to hurt us. And that makes them all part of something bigger, and it removes their individuality. If that individuality comes back and Baron decides to go on a kill spree or a big redemptive thing, that could be a big problem for her. But she's also just mown down a load using the ship's guns. So that would probably come to hit her as well. That's the problem. She has started to create an us and a them. And that them has become much bigger than it used to be. Because it was her against the world, but it was individuals. You know, she wasn't too keen on Prinkle because he was, you know, doing all his work and nice at her, and she didn't really know what to do with that. The guys working in the prisons, even though they were Empire, you know, she knew Dave, she knew Sodon, he was working, he had a family back home, this, that, the other. And you can get by with the excuse of everyone has to make a living. But now they're faceless Empire.
Yeah, it's a dangerous road to walk, isn't it?
It is. It's that impersonal approach, which even in real life is the cause of 1,000 tiny cruelties that, because it's impersonal, no one takes responsibility for, and they just trickle down.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That was more of a curiosity rather than a specific point on the morality question, I suppose. But it's still given me a bit more insight into where Lasser is, because this will be the last morality check-in we have of the campaign. So
the last thing I will say is she does regret taking the actions she took. She doesn't really want to face them beyond, yep, it happened, probably wasn't a good thing, but at the time I thought it needed doing, which is probably the biggest way to make yourself keep going when you've done something like that. But it has opened the door to more things, to the expendability of certain people's lives in defense of her own, her friends, and the people she cares for. But there is definitely regret there. And I think it hit her bad, but the recovery has been not rapid, but slow and cumulative with the help of Jaren and people like that. You know, she's not been punished for it. She's not been ostracized or had any big consequences come from it. If that was to happen, I don't know how she'd respond. But now she seems to be back on track for this can happen occasionally. Unlike Baron, who's like, no, now I really need to make a solid choice every time a death comes up. She's like, well, I understand that these things do come up occasionally and they get done and then we deal with it afterwards, which is interesting for her. I was really worried that the character was going to end up being, oh no, now I have killed someone, I don't know how to move on from this. But everybody has been very, yeah, it's not great, but it does happen sometimes. You need to be able to move on. And she's like, okay, then I can. And I think up until someone shoves it in her face and goes, do you remember this person, mask off person with friends and family and a life that they were trying to lead and choices that they made to try and get by? Do you remember when you saw that as a continuing story, as opposed to just these things, these people, pieces on a table that are in your way or helping you or stopping you from achieving your goal, then it might all come crumbling down again. But it's been beneficial to me to be able to keep playing the character, to have had that support for, yep, we just have to keep going. But yeah, it's definitely still sit there.
Is that why you didn't tell Prinkle? Because he's the kind of person who would make you face that?
Maybe, but she's also not the kind of person who would readily come forward with her own weaknesses and go,
fair.
This is something I need to
Very
talk
fair.
about. It worked best when Jiren came over and distracted her from stuff, and she understood what he was trying to do, but she's not a big talker. She tends to get very defensive. So if Prinkle were to come to her and ask about it, then she'd have to face what Prinkle would think of her. But it's very much, we've moved on from this now. It is in a box. It is shoved away. And unless someone makes her bring it out, it's not something she really wants to look at again.
Cool, thank you. So, factoring all that in, you also used 4 dark side points. Your starting conflict is 19.
Okay.
Can you please roll me a d10?
That is a 1.
Okay.
Just double checking. Yeah, that's definitely a 1.
Do you know what? Given that this is the first time that Lass has actually felt remorse for any of the stuff she's done throughout the whole campaign, all the rest of the things that you've done when we've had these conversations, you've been quite stubborn about. And this is the first time that Lasser in the story has gone, kind of wish that wasn't how it ended, but needs must sometimes. I think it works that you rolled a 1. Because it's not something she can just brazen through with a I'm right. That works. So you drop by 18. Your morality now is 34. You are still a light side force user.
Okay.
And given that this will be the last check-in of the campaign, I imagine, that's probably where you'll stay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Mikey. I play Jiren. He's a Chiss Mystic Advisor. His emotional strength is his enthusiasm, and his emotional weakness is his recklessness. As time goes on, by the way, Adam, I've been saying recklessness more and more with a POM over this last season. It's getting worse and worse. I can't stop it.
I've noticed. And in fact, one of the things that I will be talking to you throughout this chat is whether you feel that's still the right emotional weakness for you for the last blip of the arc.
We'll see how it goes, I think. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. So, originally, up until the last episode, what I was going to be talking to you here is the fact that Jiren acted as a cowardly bully towards Bosco. And I was going to talk about how the fact that when he was weak and defenseless and in your power, rather than ignoring him and talking to Oberon and getting over it, you belittled him, you mocked him with a lot of ad hominems rather than challenging his points. You took out the fact that Lasser had upset you on him, and that was the point we were going to kind of pitch it.
Well, before we go on to the next bit, I want to address that, because essentially Bosco pushed every single one of Jiren's buttons. Jiren was reacting to it. He was... I mean, just because of the situation, I would say that Bosco was being as much of a bully as Jiren. It just so happened to be he was in prison. So, yeah, I think Bosco got exactly the response out of Jiren that he expected. Yeah, because Jiren is severely not over the fact that he was betrayed by somebody he liked. So, yeah.
And in fairness, Bosco was deliberately trying to hit those buttons, because Bosco knew you well and knew what buttons to hit with you. Obviously, there was a certain amount of, I know you well, and therefore I know what buttons to hit with Jiren. There was a deliberate bit of mirroring there in terms of Bosco knowing how to goad you.
Yeah.
So, yes, I do take your point.
I would say it was a little bit impotent of Jiren. He wasn't going to do anything because he couldn't have. At that point, he was not capable of doing anything like that. So let's move on and talk about this episode.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. That power that you use to bring Prinkle back comes with a morality cost, generally.
It does.
From kind of mulling that over, the harm suite of powers can be used in an active combat situation. And I think if it had been used in that still active combat situation, then I think that the 7 conflict that accrues would be the start and end point, really.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think we need to contextualize what's going on. You deliberately, with a degree of calculation, and I say with a degree of calculation because it wasn't, again, I'm prepared to accept a degree of recklessness in the you were scrabbling around for anything you could find to bring your friend back because you couldn't face the fact of his death. But you waited until Oberon brought this unconscious stormtrooper past you.
Yeah.
And without even talking to the rest of the crew, and I read that as Jiren knowing that if he raised it, they might say no. So he just did it.
Yeah.
And you murdered a defenseless enemy in cold blood.
All right. I was quite far away with Prinkle at the time when we started off and wasn't in that combat. I think he would have done it sooner if he'd had the opportunity to do so, but there was a lot of carrying Prinkle from one end of the fight to the other. So if he'd have had the opportunity to do it in combat, he would have done, because it was kind of he was looking around for an attempt to do something. I think he did kill this guy when he was defenseless, and Jiren certainly would, if he had the same opportunity again, do it again. There's none of this, I think I've mentioned to you before, and I'm going to quote it, the line from Last Action Hero, "I've just killed a man, I did it on purpose." And he did it on purpose because there was nothing else he could have done to put this right. But he didn't just pick a random person. I mean, it was the only person available, but that person was not randomly selected from the crowd or anything like that. That person was one of the people who were trying to kill Prinkle, and possibly the person who did. He didn't see where the shot came from. But certainly, up until that point, they're antagonists who were trying to murder us, or at least trying to murder Prinkle and the rest of the crew. So certainly Prinkle. So it was in his, it's not quite an eye for an eye sort of thing, but it wasn't like he's a random serial killer who would pick random people in there. He picked this person because he thought that person had done wrong to Prinkle and wanted to address the balance of it all.
Yeah.
I think you are bang on the money about him not telling anybody else because they try and stop him. But in his mind, he wasn't being so much duplicitous and not trying to stop people from trying to convince him out of things, because they always try and talk Jiren out of his foolishness. It's a kind of a standard thing throughout the entire thing. Yeah. Jiren will suggest something and they'll say it's an idiot idea, and he'll do it anyway. But he was, at that point, and especially because of the episode before, he suddenly became very much, no, I actually am the captain. And beforehand, he was just saying, "Oh, I'm the captain." But the episode before, where he went through, well, it might have been the one before that, actually, where he went through everybody and talked to everybody and made sure everybody was all right and acted as a captain, pushed him towards that, I need to make sure my crew is all right. And that pushed him to the edge of, I need to make sure that Prinkle does not suffer for our mistakes. And the person who suffers for the mistakes is the Stormtrooper. And I think he's at that point where he realizes that if people start with us and try and kill us, then he will do anything he can to stop that from happening, including the deaths of these people. If they are unarmed, then fair enough. He's not armed. So he doesn't see somebody carrying a weapon as a significant thing. But yeah, you were right, completely on the money. The guy was helpless, but there was nothing else he could have done. If he'd have left it any longer than he did, Prinkle would have stayed dead. So whilst I acknowledge it wasn't the best of actions, he feels that he did it for the right reasons to a person that, in all honesty, deserved it.
Do you think Prinkle would have agreed to his resurrection if he knew the cost of it?
Possibly not, but I certainly think that Prinkle wouldn't agree to his death.
Well, he pushed Agatha out of the way. He chose to take those blaster shots so that Agatha didn't.
Yeah, but when people do that sort of thing, they do it for the love of the person that they're pushing out of the way, not because they want to die. So he wasn't there to kill himself. He was there to save Agatha. And in a similar way, my consequences now are not for anything other than to save Prinkle. But I accept, like Prinkle did, accept the consequences. Unfortunately, there's nobody there to push Jiren out of the way for these consequences.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, he's Jiren accepts that he has done something, but he doesn't necessarily think it was a mistake. And he doesn't, certainly, it's very simple to discuss dark side and light side as good and evil. And the Jedi certainly see it like that. But he's not a Jedi. He's never had the mindset of a Jedi. I'm damning myself, but it's more the Sith point of view of connections to people, because the Jedi eschew connections, and he is all about them. And he wasn't willing to let this connection go, not particularly for his own fear, but for his own. I mean, it's not much of a better sin, but for his own pride and to a certain extent for his own compassion that he doesn't want people to be injured to a front of him. And if you look at it from a purely dead or alive point of view, the Stormtrooper took the hit of it all. But the Stormtrooper, like us, knew exactly what he was getting into. The Stormtrooper was there to kill us. The person who's going to have to live with the burden of this is Prinkle for knowing what I've done, and Jiren for the actual consequences of trying to save people. So it is not something I particularly want to argue against you giving him anything, because I know usually people come to these things and say, oh, no, I've been very good. I've been done. Oh, I shouldn't have this, that, and the other. I totally should have these consequences. But I just want you to know that he did them not because he feels that he doesn't feel he's murdered somebody. He feels that he has done this to save a life and taken the life of somebody who had already decided that this was the way forward. Prinkle hadn't decided. Prinkle doesn't know these things. Prinkle is a kind, honest, and innocent soul who feels, I think, probably a little bit more of an optimist and seeing the world in black and white more than all of us. And he can't have Prinkle face those consequences if he has a way of stopping it. So he'd do it again, probably with another unconscious Stormtrooper. He doesn't think, it's kind of, I feel like I should be putting an Agatha Christie evil voice right now. Yes, I would do it again.
These conversations, as you know from my approach to morality, and it's something I'm definitely going to be addressing when we come back in another campaign, I don't feel that a drop in morality is a negative thing necessarily. It's not a punishment, I suppose what I should. It's not a punishment.
Yeah.
I see the morality as a measure of where you fall between the light and the dark, rather than how dare you do a bad thing, here is a slap.
Yeah.
We are all the consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
That is the road we walk. And as Star Wars has shown us, there is still redemption for the worst of us, and there is still the chance to fall for the best of us.
Yeah.
So that's how I approach things.
Yeah. Well, Jiren certainly doesn't think that, before this, thought of himself as a good person who did things for the right reasons. And after this, still considered himself as a good person who does things for the right reasons. It's just those things have kind of expanded. The end is more important than the means almost now to him, because he needs people to be safe. He needs people to not be pushed under the tyranny of evil. And that might mean getting his hands dirty a little bit.
Yeah. The line of acceptable loss has been pushed.
Well, no. I don't think it's moved. I think he stopped writing in pencil and now it's in pen, because the line of acceptable loss is not his crew. And beforehand, that never came up. He was always like, no, me and my crew are together. And now, no, you will not do this to these people. There will be consequences for your actions as enemies of his, that he will stop this, because he has the ability to stop this. And I'll be honest, he's probably a little bit, he's just saved somebody's life. He's just brought somebody back from the dead. It's going to mess with you, the fact that you've got that power. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah. He's one up on Anakin. Anakin fell to the dark side and didn't save anybody. In your face, Darth Vader.
Have you heard the tale of Darth Jiren the Wise?
The Reckless. Come on.
The Reckless.
And speaking of which, I think Reckless is still there, because he has he didn't discuss it with anybody. He just decided he was going to do this because that was the right thing to do.
Would you not say, though, maybe that it's now arrogance? That you know best? That the choices you've made...
I can see an argument for it, but no, not yet. I don't think he is pushing towards it. I'll be honest, it depends what Lasser does, if that makes sense. Lasser could very easily push him towards arrogance, but at the moment, he did it because it was a thing that happened in the moment, and it's the thing to do. I think after a little bit more of introspection, maybe if we see these characters in 20 years, assuming we all survive, and see these characters in 20 years, he may have gone to arrogance. But I think possibly because nobody really believes him that he's done this yet, he hasn't really gone to arrogance. Because, when he saved the crew member the first time, he's like, I did this. And they're all like, yeah, whatever, Jiren. And we went on. So he's not quite got there yet. I can see it happening. I really can, but I don't think quite yet. And I don't think before the end of the saga, I don't think he's going to go there. I mean, there will be arrogance in his voice, I imagine, at some point. But
oh yeah,
I think he's still driven by his recklessness.
Okay, that's cool. It's just something that I wanted to talk through with you. Okay, so here we come to it then.
Here we go.
You have accrued through dark side points and through the water of life, and that force heal power.
Yeah.
17 conflict just from dark side points and usage.
I should state to the listeners, I'm currently on 43.
Yeah. Factoring in the murder.
Yes.
And other actions.
Mm-hmm.
Your starting conflict before we roll.
Yeah.
Is 32.
Nice. I know I need to keep it quiet, but as soon as Ross knows, I'm going to in his face for his 14. Just amateur hour. Amateur hour.
Is that a 10?
No.
That's a 1.
That's a 1. You know, I have rolled 1s on a lot of these rolls.
Yeah.
Oh my word, that is wonderful. Sorry, 1 second.
It's all right.
And I'm back.
You drop by 31 morality to 12.
Yes.
You will be going into episode 28 and the final denouement of the Coldfire Chronicles as a dark side force user.
Oh, yes.
Now, this has some mechanical effects in game. The first one being that you no longer take strain for drawing on the dark side. You still take conflict for what it's worth, but meh by this point. And we'd already basically waived the having to flip because it annoys me. The dark side is tempting, and in your case, has worked.
I think I have to flip for a light side, don't I? If I use my light side, I have to flip.
You will have to flip to use light side points. That is something I am going to bring.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because otherwise there's no
negative to being the dark side. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is something to do with wounds and strain as well.
There is. So, okay. You have fallen below 20. So your strain decreases by 1.
Yep.
But your wound threshold increases by 1.
Cool.
Additionally, and I will do this kind of sneaky before we start play, whenever we roll a destiny pool, you always flip a light side to dark straight away because of your presence in there.
Yep.
And you remain a dark side force user beyond the scope of this game. Your redemptive path will take
more than the time we've got. Yeah,
considerably so.
Well, I know we need to go and kill 10th brother, but can I just go and save the orphanage?
So there we are. I would ask that you, because no one else is, the other players aren't going to know this until we start play, and this comes out. So I will leave it to you to reveal your new status at an appropriate point in the story. Our listeners will hear this before episode 28 airs.
Yeah.
So when we start recording again, we'll all be on the same page.
Let's see if they work it out as the other players. I don't think we're going to be too open, but let's see if they work it out.
We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Well, there we are. No worries. Thank you.
All right.
And there we go.
Hi, I'm Ross. I play Agatha, a Morailan warrior aggressor colossus whose emotional strength is his pride and whose weakness is his obsession.
Okay, so at the last time we did a morality check-in for you, Agatha was on 46 which is the second highest in the party at the time of recording.
That in itself is a damnation of a lot of things.
Yes, it is somewhat, yeah. Just behind Lassie you were, but she was just about skirting the 50 mark. So, Okay, so obviously we did a check-in after Port Haven before you got to the stopover. So what we're really focusing on here is what's gone on since arriving on the stopover through to the last recorded episode, which was episode 27 and the resurrection of Prinkle. Previously, when we've had these kind of discussions, normally Agatha has done something horrific, and usually to Lassa, being fair here.
Yes.
But when comparing what you've been doing over these last however many episodes compared to the rest of the party, it seems to me that Agatha is actually the one that's walking the righteous path. Certainly more so than Baron for all of Ed's protestations. Because you fought Bosco in the pit, fair enough, but that was an honourable fight. You deliberately didn't use your force powers so it would be fair. And you didn't really kick him when he was down. You didn't hoof him in the beanbags, despite him hoofing yours. You know, given your background as a pit fighter and a bit of an enforcer, you could have played that a lot dirtier and you didn't.
I'm going to claim, a weakness on the part of the player here and say I forgot to kick him in the beanbags, because that was probably something that Agatha would have thought to do. But he had a lot of other things on his mind, like not unfairly using force powers at the time. So I'm going to just say he was distracted slightly.
Yeah, but it was still a fair fight when it didn't have to be, given your skill set and your new abilities.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, he had used his force powers to jump into the ring by jumping over the side of the cage rather than walk through the door. That was a bit of an intimidation thing, but
you could have hit him a lot harder than you did. You could have hurled him around with your mind, but no, you went in there and you did it old school. You also were emotional support for Lassa when she got the devastating news that effectively she couldn't stay at the only place she'd really considered home. And moreover, you kept that secret and offered her comfort without making it obvious that that was what you were doing. So you didn't shame her in front of the rest of the group, which could have happened quite easily. You did brutalize the stormtroopers at the end of the last fight, and, you broke them, you dismantled them. But at the same token, emotions were running high. You'd just been saved by Prinkle, and that must have hit your pride.
Yeah, considering pride has not usually been the strength I've gone through with Agatha's journey over the last little while. I mean, there's the pride of, having an honourable fight and reminding, it was either J-Ren or Beren, or Oberon as it probably was at the time, that, we weren't in a bar fight when Bosco was in the cell. You're allowed to, not so much shooting, because, we were essentially as sheriffs at that point, but you don't have to be pretty for the audience at that point. So you have the right to just, if he gets into trouble, just stop him, drop him where he stands. Not that meant, Lassa ought to have killed him cold where he was. There's the stormtroopers. Okay, stormtroopers are an easy target because they're fairly clearly evil. Whereas I'm pretty sure we ripped apart one of Bosco's crew, one of J-Ren's ex-crew. Agatha pretty much ripped him apart with the same force powers. And I'm pretty sure I earned a dark side point for that as well. I'm clearly not arguing, the merits of everything I'm doing right now. But in a sense, so I'm going to go with one. Agatha's sort of been trying to harmonise, especially since the temple. Agatha's been sort of trying to harmonise better with the party. It's been a rocky road because it's not as simple as we went to a temple that all was fixed. But and the journey with the rest of the characters, particularly Lassa, has shown that. But he has actually asked Beren for assistance with lightsaber training. He is trying to mesh with these people. I think we've not actually had a moment with him and J-Ren for a while.
No,
but yeah, he's generally trying to cooperate and be part of the group. Not always successfully, and sometimes that means if they lean a certain way morality-wise, like, yes, we can use lethal force in this occasion, he's occasionally going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially means if this works, let's use let's tap into force, versus if this is not going to work if it doesn't. Against in the case where Prinkle has just stood up to save him, that's definitely going to be hurt Agatha's pride, because he's a former bodyguard. He's been trying to act as a bodyguard whenever it's seemed useful for the party.
Yeah.
And a guy like a third his height has just saved his life from blaster fire, which he probably could have survived. I mean, okay, doubtful, but Agatha would have at least expected, okay, I'm going to take this hit and Prinkle will survive, or whoever else is going to survive. And Prinkle's taken a hit for him. And that's a hit to the pride. That really is going to have hurt Agatha's feelings. So that, if nothing else, will have tipped him over the edge at this point. So, which is why I've been reasonably liberal with, yes, Agatha can do some damage here, but also Agatha is descending rapidly.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, weighing things up in the balance, the main source of your conflict is the dark side points you've been drawing on rather than the actions you've been doing.
There's that. I mean, there is a conflict in Agatha at the minute because he's never really... he knew where he was in the prison. Beyond that, we've been going to various places, and the party started asking questions like, what are we going to do after this? And up until the stopover, he didn't really have anywhere to go in any direction. And then they started offering questions, I mean, like the sheriff's badge in particular, but they started offering him, here are some options, here are some actual, you could do this. And some of that is, okay, do you want to go with the crew or do you want to stay at the stopover? And there is a source of conflict there, like which does Agatha want to do afterwards? He's no idea at this point. It's not a case of being at the stopover would mean he wouldn't see them again, because odds are they were. And then he's had to give that up because that's not how things have gone down.
Well, it's not how things have gone down yet. Who knows what the future may hold?
Well, yeah, but he has... Well, I mean, at this point, he has given the badge back, and if Lusses can't go back to the stopover for the time being, odds are he's not going to go back in that direction either. So in a sense, he has given some things up there, but it's not ruled out. He has options, and he's got choices, and that's something he hasn't really had before.
Yeah, because that was one of the things I was going to come on to, actually, was the stopover and those options finally being offered and where that had put your mindset. But I think you've hit that nail quite neatly just there.
He's got choice. I mean, Agatha's... I mean, we went the path because anger wasn't really something I was drawing upon as often as I should have done. But with Pyjack missing, I've tried to hit the nail as often as I could have. Agatha is obsessed at this point with, we want to get Pyjack back. And as far as that quest is concerned, I mean, Pyjack is here at this point in the story. However this resolves, Agatha hasn't thought beyond that point in the story yet. Well, correct, he has got clearly thought about it because we've been to the stopover and such, and he has been given options. But it's not been something he's going to focus on until Pyjack's fate is secure.
I mean, that is something else that I have offered to everyone else we're going through here. Do you want to change either your emotional strength or your emotional weakness at this point? Do we think we've hit a crux point again for Agatha to change that focus? Or is the fact that Pyjack isn't freed yet still what's driving him? Or has his obsession now shifted?
No. At the minute, he still wants to get Pyjack back. But after that, I mean, this is the weakness of an obsession. You don't think beyond the obsession. So while it's there, it's something that's going to be troubling him a bit as to what he does do after that fact. Right now, he can brush aside the actual question and just focus on the immediate, I need to hit things, and this is what's driving. But there is the niggle there of, okay, well, I do have goals and possibilities beyond simply hitting the next thing or retrieving this one friend. Because, I mean, he won't have thought of, for example, of, okay, well, if I do go back to the stopover after this, is Pyjack coming with me? He hasn't thought to that at all.
Yeah.
Where will Pyjack go next? I don't know. So to some extent, that's been a matter of, we don't even know if he's still alive. But at the same time, yeah, he hasn't thought beyond getting Pyjack back at this point, but there's a number of things playing around in his head.
So sticking with them for the moment, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
next episode.
Yeah, I haven't made this decision yet. If Agatha doesn't survive, he doesn't have to make that decision. So
true, but we all still live in hope.
We do.
Okay, so you have accrued 9 conflict just from your dark side point usage.
Mm-hmm.
Weighing in the balance everything else, your actions, that sort of stuff, your starting conflict for this roll is 13.
Okay.
Which, it might not hit your magic 14, but you have used a lot more dark side points than you did that time. That was mostly 14 by yeeting party members at monsters, as opposed to just drawing heavily upon the power of the Force.
Agatha has been using the Force a lot more of late.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to make a dice roll. Remind me, is a 1 good?
A 1 is not good. A 1 is the lowest you can get. So with a 1, that means that your conflict overall is 12.
Yep.
Which drops your morality score to 34.
Oh dear.
The upside is This is the last morality check-in of the campaign. You are not falling to the dark side yet.
No.
I mean, unless you go like proper hog wild the next few episodes and just pump away like 15 dark side points. But as things currently stand, you have not fallen to the dark side as we enter this last few episodes of the campaign.
I mean, unless Prinkle dies again or Pyjack takes a turn to the worse, I think we're probably past that. I think Prinkle coming back has probably helped matters a little bit there.
Yeah.
We have hit Agatha technically just at the nadir of this part of the arc.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, the first nadir of this arc. Could be worse. I don't know. We'll find out.
It could be worse. We don't know yet. There's still 10th brother to go.
And 3 other party members to roll.
Yes.
Because I don't know.
Nope. No, you don't.
This should be fun.
So there we are. 34 morality.
34.
And still a light side user at the moment.
Yeah.
Right.
At the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ed Fortune, and I play the character of Baron, formerly Oberon Brick. He is a human sentinel hunter-seeker. His emotional strength is justice, and his emotional weakness is cruelty.
Just to kind of refresh you and the listeners on where we stand with your morality, we are beginning this chat with Baron on a morality score of 33. For reference, 29 or below, and you fall. Okay?
I win a prize. Win a prize. It's a stupid prize, but, you know.
It is a prize nevertheless. And the last morality check was when we left Port Haven, so what we're looking at here is from the stopover onwards through to the last episode recorded, which is the resurrection of Prinkle. And the confrontation with Pyjack, just so that you've got the time frame we're discussing clear in our heads. So, there's kind of 2 things I want to discuss with you here. And one is a broader pattern, and the other one is a specific act. So I'm going to focus in first of all on Bosco, because he's the specific act I want to focus in on. He was at your mercy in that prison cell. He was no threat to you at that point. And between you and Jiren, you bullied him.
Yep.
In a cowardly and quite vicious fashion. Petty fashion as well, I would say.
I disagree. I was sticking up for my friend.
But before he started needling Jiren, you were there playing with a knife in front of him. Your body language was very threatening.
Yes, because we knew he had form. And essentially, it wasn't so much Oberon is not a nice person. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's dark side. And you can be an unpleasant person who's awful to hang around with, who doesn't have the values that you hold dear, and still actually be on the light side. You can be a good guy. Now, he is a bully. He's a bully that was brought from bullies. He's inclined to cruelty. And I was playing on the inclined to cruelty. And there's that inclination to justice as well. So yes, he was being a bit of a bully, but he was looking out for the people that he loves and the principles that he loves. There was a balance to his actions. I would say, yes, it's not a good look, but it's not, on the side of kicking puppies, he's gotten better.
On the scale of things that the rest of the party have done, if nothing else, yeah, I think it's safe to say that you're at the lower end of the naughty scale for that, but it was still something that stood out to me.
It's cruelty.
Yeah, because, you could just have ignored him and distracted Jiren with conversation other ways, but yeah, I get your point.
And as that conversation, if memory serves, as that conversation goes, he's angry at Bosco for that way of thinking, because it's very close to the way he thinks as well. I would guess that Bosco's emotional weakness is also cruelty.
Yeah, you'd be right with that.
And they are, he recognizes the nonsense that is, if you see what I mean, whilst ironically also still leaning into it because it's part of who he is.
Yeah, that's cool. And I suppose, just to reiterate again, that what we're looking at here is it's not necessarily a punishment. It's just a measure of where we sit on the scale. And that is a weakness I feel with the way that morality is framed in this particular game. Because it seems like a punishment when to me it's not, it's just a gauge.
It feels like we should be weighing our hearts rather than doing a checkbox exercise.
Yeah.
And the way the game's designed is, because it's very FFG game, it's got that kind of tick box mechanic to it, which is, there is better ways to do this, and I'm sure we'll invent one as we do other campaigns. We might try something in Shadows, I don't know, we'll think about it.
But I mean, like, the fact that we're having this as this kind of discussion is my attempt to redress that.
Yeah.
De-mechanize it a little bit and kind of have the chat about where we feel. So that was kind of the specific thing I wanted to talk about. The other one is, I suppose it's the wider pattern of behaviour. And it's something I've noticed particularly. Beren is saying an awful lot about trying to walk a more righteous path. But when the chips go down, his instincts still remain cruel and lethal. And one of the things that really hit me was when you were facing off against some of the stormtroopers, you have a habit of apologising to people and then murdering them.
Yeah.
Well, not murdering. Murdering is too strong. And then killing them. Your rifle does have a stun setting.
It does, but that's not what it's for. At some point, he will use the stun setting, and then he'll pull a lightsaber, because he knows that he feels that if he dies, they all die. And fear is the path to the dark side. And fear is the thing that's going... I think we talked about fear the last time we did one of these things.
Yeah.
And fear is that big thing. And it's a brave choice to say no. It's a brave choice to stop. And he tries. But there's that line between, but if I fail them, they all die. And it's the wrong things for the right reasons, or the right things for the wrong reasons. The combination changes. But yeah, he does kill. The one that springs to my mind is when we went to get Jiren's ship back.
Mm.
That was a massacre. That was a massacre. And he was very glad that they surrendered, because he wants people to surrender. But it's a lethal shot after lethal shot, if you see what I'm saying. He wants them he wants them to run. Please run. Oh, okay. It's playing into the sad assassin archetype that the character is, where he's like, please don't. I will kill you. Please go away. Please run. Please stop talking. Please, because most of the time, the deaths are just. They're not good people that he's killing. And if they don't run, then the bit of him that is very much a brick, very cruel, delights in that sort of thing, says yes, pull the trigger. And that's the line he wants to be a hero. I don't think this is a universe that's going to let him. It's very much to the broader themes of what Star Wars comes from. I don't think it's very Star Wars, but I think it's very pulp sci-fi.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my points that I wanted to raise here. Do you have anything that you want to highlight and discuss?
I think, from a Star Wars mystical nonsense point of view, the stripping of his identity to become someone else is a thing. It's a very Star Wars thing as well. It's a very Knights of the Old Republic style vibe of going, I could be this. I feel that if he does fall, he'll fall quite hard. And like the after show animatic, should we survive, is not going to be kind to the character. And that's great. On the other hand, if he somehow avoids falling, I think he kind of fades and becomes this kind of mysterious, stranger style figure, which again leans into the pulp vibe that is Star Wars. And you don't really see many of the shadow style characters, and you really should. There should be more mysterious strangers. Luke should be a mysterious stranger rather than, he should be just turning up fully cowled and not this hero of the Republic, but just a dude who helps you out with incredible power. But I kind of digress. So I think that moment where I got to talk down Lassa, and Jiren did not understand.
Yeah.
And he's basically saying, look, you have a path. Please don't follow me. And it's like, that is a trophy. Like, she took a trophy. That is the path to becoming like him.
Absolutely a trophy.
And he is like, do not do that. However, I'm not going to say to you, don't do that. I'm going to say to you, you need to look at that trophy and decide whether you're throwing it away. And this is from a character who has thrown it all away. He's abandoned and stripped. I'm expecting the Brick family to still destroy the things that he loves. I think Baron is as well. But if Baron remains where he wants to be, he will come back methodically. I think his nature might change quite a lot as well. But it's desperately trying to dump the cruelty. I think if I stay on the light side, I might have a conversation about changing the emotional weakness to something gentler.
That was something I was going to bring up, because it's a choice I've offered everyone in these one-to-ones, and that is, do you want to change either your emotional strength or weakness, or do you want to see how the roll goes and then consider, or are you happy where you are for now?
Let's see where the roll goes, because the dice mechanics decide how I further make the choices about my character, which is a bit weird, but there we go. So yes, I think if he stays on the light, cruelty has to go. And I think that's the ritual shedding thing that's going on. It's something a bit more Obi-Wan and a little bit less,
Anakin.
A little bit less. I was going to say Kylo Ren, which is even worse. He's meant to be a Kylo Ren Zuko style character. I hope the listeners have got that he's meant to be the Zuko in a party that isn't really the Team Avatar.
So, you have steadfastly avoided drawing upon the dark side at any point since our last morality check-in, so there is no additional conflict brought on by that. So your starting conflict before the dice roll is 5.
I rolled a 4.
That means your morality drops by 1 to 32. You have not fallen to the dark side.
Before I rolled the dice, my brain was like, this is going to be a 4 or a 6. It's either going to be a slight degradation or a slight improvement. But yeah, that is hilarious, actually. Right, so he's changed. He's gotten less worse.
Yes. And because this is the last morality check-in of the campaign, unless you do something like horrific in the next few episodes, you will not fall to the dark side before the end of this game.
Yes, Father, I will join the dark side, I believe is the line.
Yes. So, do you want me to go through the short list of strengths and weaknesses?
Yes, but just the weaknesses, because I think justice is going to remain, and skip the ones that don't make sense.
Okay, so arrogance, pride among all emotions, is perhaps the easiest to fall to a darker form. Satisfaction in one's accomplishments is replaced with contempt for others failing. It is not enough to succeed. You also expect others to fail.
Oh, he's very far away from pride right now. It's a good one, and I almost considered it for the start of the campaign, but pride is not where he's at. Righteousness, maybe self-righteousness, but not pride.
Coldness. Self-reliance can slip into isolation if one is not careful. A cold character doesn't just desire to rely on himself, but has nothing but disinterest for anybody else. If they can't help themselves, why should he help them?
Had Prinkle died, yes.
Yeah.
Coldness would be perfect.
Yeah.
But Prinkle's not dead yet.
Weakness. Your emotional weakness is weakness. There is a fine line between showing mercy to one's foes and letting evil fester because one does not want to engage with it. The character may let bad things happen simply because it's too hard to deal with them. Which for me is not so much it's a too hard, like with Mr. Flesh, it's I don't want to walk down this path any further, so someone else is going to have to do it for me almost.
I think it's going to have to be weakness, even though weakness isn't quite where we are. I want to go for coldness, but I feel... do you know what? Let's go for coldness.
Yep.
And it's going to develop over time, I think, because I think something sad's going to happen in this campaign. I think something very sad is going to happen to one of the characters. I have, by the way, listeners, no idea because we've not played through those sessions yet. I have a feeling that something awful is going to happen to one of the characters that he loves.
Even more sad than Prinkle being double murdered.
But Prinkle's still alive right now.
I mean...
Like he's up and around. So there's a level there.
He has just started breathing again.
Yeah, point.
But yes.
I think coldness and his heart, which isn't very big to begin with, is starting to crack. And should Prinkle or Lassa or Agatha or even Jiren die, or even Pajak, I mean, he's also had to, attack his friend and all the rest of it. He's not in a I think coldness is a place to go. Also, thematically, it fits physically where they are.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the heart freezing as he becomes a bit more cynical, and yeah, that's again a scary combination of justice and coldness. But it's a step above cruelty for this character, at least. And it's also somewhere between. It's all because like weakness and coldness are like it's not quite the. It's just being very tired. It's the old soul thing. I think we're kind of going for.
I mean, there's there's a huge list on Ogdude because it's bringing in from all the other stuff. Alienation.
Oh, alienation is a good description of where he's at, but I think mechanically we'll go for coldness.
Alienation is an option on the list. It's just not from the core rulebook. It's from Endless Vigil, which is the Sentinel's core book. But that seems to fit where you are as a better description than coldness.
Yeah, alienation. Let's go for alienation. Because that also means that if we survive this, there's a chance that he goes off and becomes a weirdo in the woods somewhere who occasionally blows up freighters carrying the war machine and that sort of thing, and then wanders off again. And that kind of... He becomes the Shadow, let's be honest. He turns into that kind of character who appears, does something vaguely heroic, and then goes and wanders off again as a legend. The dark side version of this character, of course, is just called the Prodigal.
Yes. Okay, so you are still light side. Your emotional weakness has changed to alienation.
Bless. I like this character. I kind of looking forward to stop playing him, if that makes any sense. I want to see where he goes, and then I'm going to tuck it into bed or into its grave, whatever, and then walk away and maybe not play Zuko again for a while. I think I've had my fill of angst.
Yes. Well, right, that's it for this then. Thank you very much.
Pleasure as always, and to everyone listening, stay safe, and you will take care.
Well, there you have it. That is the end of this little bonus episode. We go into the final part of the story, with one of our characters having taken a tumble too far into the shadows and the others clinging on by their fingertips to the light. How will that affect them in the story? How will that affect them in play? Well, stay tuned and you will find out next time. Force Majeure is played using the Star Wars Force and Destiny game system by Fantasy Flight Games and Lucas Books. Our intro music for this season is Unholy Night by Kevin MacLeod, and our outro music remains Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale, both used with gratitude under the Creative Commons license. If you like the show and want to interact with us, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, all of which are at Force Majeure Pod, though Twitter is probably where you're going to find us more regularly. If you enjoy what we do and want to support the show, there's 3 ways you can do that. The first is via our Patreon at patreon.com/forcemajeurepod. The second is by buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/forcemajeurepod. And the third way is by rating and reviewing us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, anywhere where you can find us. We really like reviews. It tells us that we're telling the stories that you want to hear and helps other people find us. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next time.